I think it can be pretty easy to make it about, preservation of wealth and preservation of status and preservation of these things. And it's like, if that's your end game, you're probably always going to be dissatisfied. But if you believe that, hey, we're going to be generous, whether we got $1 in our pocket or we got a bunch of zeros in our bank account, then I think you can start to establish some interesting habits that will transcend generations, that will kind of go beyond whether or not your family's successful in a given business venture or investment.
Every week here on More Than Profit, we explore the stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and investors who have made a difference in the world while building successful businesses. We sit down with each guest and dive into their personal journey, their struggles and triumphs, and the lessons they've learned along the way. On this episode, we sit down with Reilly Flynn, the founder of both Lome and GAN Ventures. Lome builds tech tools that families need to manage chaos, collaborate with their communities, establish healthy rhythms, and deepen relationships. GAN Ventures is an early-stage VC fund that invests in tech-driven startups in and around the Global Accelerator Network. Previously, Reilly worked for nonprofits and startups in Colorado, Cambodia, and Virginia. Born and raised in Williamsburg, Virginia, Reilly now lives with his wife, Katie, and their 4 young children in Littleton, Colorado. Beyond his impressive professional career, Reilly has a unique experience of marrying into the prominent business family that founded Dish Network. Throughout his life, Reilly has always been a leader in any room, and it was such a privilege to have an honest conversation about him finding his footing within this highly successful and visible family, and press forward to have an impact on the world, recognizing and embracing his unique responsibility and desiring to use his privilege to serve others.
I met my wife in a bar. What's what I tell most people. And I literally did. My wife and I were mutual friends. A guy that I was stationed in Korea with was getting deployed to Afghanistan. And you don't do going away parties in the military, especially when they're going to combat. So you do come back home soon parties. And so we did a come back home soon get together at this dive bar in Louisville. And my wife was there. I was going to go for 15 minutes. I had no interest in kind of hanging around, but she was the only one not really drunk. And
this is the start of a bad story right here. So yeah.
And then I started talking to her, and she had just gotten back from these medical mission trips in Africa. And she was actually quite interesting. Like, I just didn't expect that in this place. And so we started talking.
But tell them the rest though, is you were Christian, your wife was Christian, and they were like, oh, it's like Amway. You're the only 2 Christians I know. Let's put them in a room at a bar.
That's true. I mean, that is a true story. Yeah. I think that is a kind of a funny thing, because I've got lots of different friends, and we were their only 2 Christian friends. And so in their minds, of course, oh, you guys are Christians, you should be hanging out together. And so that's what I was actually resisting. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to go well. But she actually ended up being this really, really cool person. And here we are 17 years later.
Well, but how quickly did you guys get engaged?
We don't need to talk about everything, Brian. I mean,
how long?
This isn't an interview.
How long?
We were engaged. We dated for 3 months.
Okay.
And then we were engaged for 4.
Okay. So yeah, because I think this is, because our guest today, we're going to talk a little bit about how they met their spouse after I share mine, but I just want to make sure that the listeners can compare how long your engagement and those things were versus his. So yeah. So anyway, so I met my wife at University of Arizona. Best thing that ever happened to me. She saw me across a crowded room. I probably had my shirt off or half on, wearing a tank top. I was pretty jacked at the time. Listeners don't know this, but still pretty jacked. And I was like just like a piece of chocolate in a fat kid's hand. That girl could not get enough of me. And honest truth. And then we started spending time together, and she realized that I was good looking, but not as fantastic as I thought I was. But with a little pursuit and the grace of God, we got married. And so we dated a year, engaged for a year. And so really
we're starting with this because it's a little bit different. I know, to start with families, but our guest has an unusual story. It's like anything else. I mean, he's married, loves his wife dearly, but the circumstances are a little bit different. So Reilly Flynn, good friend of ours, been a friend for a long time. Reilly, how did you meet your wife, Katie?
Katie and I met in our first year of college at the University of Virginia. in Larry Sabato's Politics 101 class. It's a very big class.
So who's smarter between you and Katie? Let's just get that for the listeners.
Absolutely me.
I would go with Katie every time, but okay. You say that. That's good.
No, Riley's got he's got some degrees behind him. I like it.
Yep. Keep going.
So it's a very big class, and it's a bunch of freshmen. So it's like very raucous environment, and everyone's talking about the parties they're going to go to or whatever. And my friend and roommate and I kind of thought the whole thing was ridiculous. And so we kind of mocked the whole thing. And at one point, fairly early in the semester, a girl walked down the aisle that he knew because he was interested in one of her friends. And she looked over at us and she said, "Yo." And we kind of laughed and said, "What kind of girl says yo?" And every time she walked in for the rest of the semester, we would yell yo and she would yell yo back. And then it kind of made its way outside of that classroom, and we would yell yo to each other across campus or around town. And literally 3 years later,
how often is this? Is this like once a month? I
mean, it's a big school, but the campus
it's a huge school.
The campus is, it's, I don't know, once a month or so. And I didn't know her name. So I would come back and say, "Oh, I saw Yo today." And I thought she was cute, but I didn't know anything about her.
Yep.
And a couple of times we had these, we were on the same sidewalk instead of far apart. And so we both have this memory of this one time, where we were both on the same sidewalk and we had a conversation, but I still didn't know her name. And and then at the end of third year, so literally almost 3 full years later, somebody else heard our yo greeting, assumed that we were closer than we were, and we ended up in a conversation about what we were doing that weekend. I was going hiking. She wanted to go hiking. She got my number. We went on what was supposed to be a group hike. It ended up being just her and I. I fell in love. But she just had a good hike.
And what did you fall in love with? What was it that you fell in love with?
It was just a phenomenal conversation. She was an interesting person. Yep. She was very intelligent. But I think I just learned, you start to learn the depth. And what's amazing, I mean, for a first date to be walking for hours in beautiful nature, it was a cool opportunity to get to know somebody and have that kind of long conversation with pretty low stakes. And, but so I fell in love, and then she went abroad, fast forward. And then we found out that both of us had signed up to do the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, DC. And we didn't have any other friends who were running this marathon. And so we ended up doing our long runs.
Big surprise there.
Yeah. We ended up doing our long runs together. And that was kind of our courtship. Ooh. It was I was kind of trying to date her, and she was kind of just hanging out. And over those long miles, I just wore her down.
Yo.
And she's still in my phone as Yo today.
That's cool.
But along the way, to your point, Bryce, that part's maybe unique, although everybody's kind of how I met somebody is unique. But what I didn't know was that Katie's parents have been really successful. Part of Katie's identity, not all of it, but Katie's identity is she comes from this family of entrepreneurs who her parents founded and still own and control and work on Dish Network, the satellite TV company. And so they have this kind of massive story. And even through our courtship and then eventual dating, I didn't grow up in a household that my dad's an artist, my mom's a teacher. We didn't get the Wall Street Journal. I was an education major, English lit major. I didn't know any of this. And at some point, my senior year, while we were dating, somebody said, "Well, surely you know who this girl is." And I'm like, "No, I don't know." And pulls up a Wikipedia page for my father-in-law, and I knew nothing about any of that. But I was in love with, I was just in love with this girl.
And when did she fall in love with you? Because you had to wear her down, and I will see actually Katie next week, but I would love to know at what point did she go, "Okay, no, he's the guy for me."
She would say, that moment I referenced back where we both met on the sidewalk and we had a conversation when we were still kind of yoing. She would say she had an interest. She was like, "Oh, that guy's kind of an interesting guy."
Which you are very interesting.
But I think it was during that courtship of running kind of training for the marathon and then running. By the time we ran the marathon, I think she was interested and we started officially dating and all that. But it took, so I don't know, 4 years from when we met.
Yeah. See, big difference, Bryce. That's a big difference between 4 months, 4 years.
Hey, when you know, you know.
When you know, you know.
You do.
Well, and there's also, there's just different factors. And Reilly, I appreciate you kind of sharing some of that because we all marry into families, right? The good, the bad, the ugly. And we just kind of, when we get married, we're not just marrying a spouse and that's the end of it. That's the only person. Like there's an entire history and family. But for you, there was a lot more than just history and family. There was a business. I mean, the family was a business in a sense, and conversations are just at a different scale. And so it's not like me marrying my wife and we go off and we have children and I get a job and she's working, and there's a lot more complexity there. So what was that like? When was the first time you kind of recognized, oh, this is a little bit different than my other friends? Like my other friends that are getting married and going off and doing cool things. My experience is different than that. Was there anything that kind of you realized that was kind of the first for you?
Well, I mean, the first time I went to Colorado, which is where my wife is from and where I now live, the first time we flew out, she kind of had organized this whole weekend, and her mom happened to be out with a team from the company recruiting and so there was a private plane that we could fly to Colorado on. I was unaware of, what private air travel was. I mean, I knew it existed, but
yeah, sure.
And then we went and we had this incredible weekend and did a number of things that, were just really fun, but also privileged, and I think that was probably the first moment where I was like, oh, this is like a lot packed into a small thing. I think what's amazing about her family is they're incredibly down to earth in the midst of all that. It's like, we landed and we went straight when we got to Colorado on that trip, we went straight to like this like hole in the wall Italian restaurant, and it's like homemade pasta. And it was like $10 a plate or something. It wasn't like we went straight to white tables, and the house they live in is, it's the house my wife grew up in, and it's really nice, but it's not anything unique or anything like that. So really, I would say like, because I didn't even have the vocabulary to comprehend the breadth of what was happening, it took a series of things. And I said I was smarter, but I think maybe I'm just it takes me a little while to understand. And so, it was just things like meeting the family, going to certain things. Her parents kind of treat it like a family business. And so family is invited in. And so sometimes, even though it's a big company, it feels quite small because there are a number of people who've been around the company for a long time. But then you have moments where you realize, wow, there are a lot of people impacted by this business, millions of customers and thousands of employees. And so it just over time, as we got more serious, I got invited into more things, but then also when we got married and we started to have conversations around the types of opportunities and responsibilities that, adult life as a part of this family might entail. My wife is the eldest of 5, and her parents are the wealth creators. And so I think it's been a journey that we've been on. We've now been 14 years married, and I think it's been a journey that we've been on as a family. Yep. Putting myself in that, learning and growing into it.
If you're part of a homeowners association who's interested in saving money on home services, let me tell you about PIN Plus, the ultimate platform that brings neighbors together under one powerful concept: power in numbers. With PIN Plus, homeowners associations can now access group discounted pricing on essential home services: trash, pest control, pool maintenance, and so much more, all at unbeatable rates. The best part, PIN Plus is designed for you, the community members. Manage your accounts, pay bills, sign up for services, and discover exciting community-wide events, all with a simple tap of a button. Your entire community, united as one customer, allows them to negotiate fantastic deals with trusted vendors in your area. So why wait? Unleash the power in numbers today and transform your home service experience. Download the PIN Plus app from the App Store or Google Play Store, or visit www.mypinplus.com for more information.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about you, I've always been impressed. You're just a deep thinker. You're very principled in how you approach things. I've seen that from the early days, even before when you were doing impact investing and figuring that out, to GAN Ventures and kind of launching a new fund, and now even with Lome. I'm just always impressed by how thoughtful and philosophical you are about the work that you're doing. And so I'm curious, like you mentioned, you choose your words really well. Like that's what I also love too. So, you mentioned one of the words I wrote down that you just said was privileged. Another was responsibility. So, kind of now 14 years into marriage and kind of how you think about the world. And, I've always seen you as a very principled kind of person that wants to leave a mark on the world, even before you met your wife. How do you now think about those words, like privilege and responsibility? And what does that mean to you? And how does that give you a sense of purpose and passion for your community and the world around you?
I think all of us are endowed with certain capabilities, opportunities, certain talents, if you will. And I think life is best lived when you're taking those talents and you're investing them, right? You're putting them out into the world, you're creating with them, you're developing them. And there's a lot of joy in growing and expressing who you truly are. And I think what I've seen this now with friends, as friends get more successful on their own, there's a temptation to take some of those chips off the table and have a little bit more of a comfortable life and play golf more or do whatever, in Colorado, it's like fly fishing and skiing. And it's not that those things are bad, but I think a lot of times it's a squandered opportunity. And so, we talk about privilege as, I get to walk into this room. I get to sit in this seat at this game or at this meeting or whatever it is. But I think all of us have that. And even I had a desire to put all of that on the table to begin with. And I think the thing that I didn't appreciate when I married into the family is that I was walking into kind of an incredible amount of that. And I think it really took me 10 plus years to digest that, even though I think I was digesting it along the way and I was able to develop and grow. We took the posture, my wife and I, that we didn't want to take anything off the table. We had advisors around us, not so much her parents, actually. Her parents are encouraging and supportive, but we had, you meet people and they're like, okay, well, you should, put this money over here or do this type of more safe investment. And from day one, we just felt like, hey, we've seen value created by taking risk, and we feel like we're in this privileged position and we want to put the chips on the table. And so we leaned into opportunities to invest in people, innovation, and value creation. And so we did that personally. That opened doors for me to start a fund, GAN Ventures, and invest in early stage companies. And my wife and I were the biggest LP in that. And I got to work with a great partner. So it just, and then as that evolved and I was exposed to a number of tech startups, I realized, hey, what I really feel passionate about and excited about is operating a business. And I got to do an entrepreneur in residence program and really think about technology in the home and the way technology impacts the family. And so leaned into that and started a company that I'm now running called Lome. And, it's all risk. I mean, if I look back at where we started and the family I'm a part of and where I am today, so many of these steps, it's not just financial risk, it's reputational risk. It's being underskilled perhaps to sit in the chair you're putting yourself in, or in the arena you're playing in, and you just continue to press in. And I think a lot of people who marry into or grow up in families like the one that I'm a part of don't put all the chips back on the table. They're not empowered to enter the arena in that way, or they're not encouraged, which, is a little bit different. And I think my wife was very supportive, and we've just continued to do that. And it's a little scary because you are like, and it's harder than just enjoying the wealth that, my in-laws have generated that we have access to. But it's more fun and it feels I feel more alive when I press in to that. So,
well, and I think, man, I help you. I really appreciate you sharing that. And one of the things I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, you mentioned her parents are the ones that kind of generated the wealth, and you've married into this family. What was that like, if you're willing to share a little bit about like coming into this family and kind of finding your footing? Because I can imagine you didn't make that money. It wasn't something you started the company. And so how do you navigate that? And were there people that helped you kind of think through that, or how did you navigate that world of, okay, this isn't the money I generated, and in fact, it's not my direct family. I'm married into this family. So how did you, after 14 years of marriage now, and you've been successful, you launched a fund, you've launched a tech startup, and you've tried to take risk in very key areas. What was that like, and kind of finding that footing for you as you kind of navigated?
Look, I think what I appreciate now that I did not appreciate at the time is when I married into this family. Well, okay, back up. Every single room I've been in my life, like I've been a leader in those rooms. I, even among other leaders at UVA, I was given leadership positions and et cetera, right? And I walked into a family with one of the top leaders in the world. Is one way to think about it, right? Is like, here's this man who's been incredibly successful, who leads tons of people to value creation every single day, and has navigated decades of business growth and evolution. And what I really appreciate now, as a father, as a husband, as a community member, as someone who participates in boards of different entities for the family, and also has been running my own entities, it took a long time for me to realize how much that shadow, my father-in-law is not casting his shadow on me intentionally.
Right.
He just is tall, and the light shines on him, so the shadow falls.
That's true.
And I'm in it. And I, like, every other time in my life, I've been able to, in a relatively short amount of time, put myself in a position to be a leader in the community I'm in. And I think this was a situation where I was like, I was really struggling. And I think a lot of what ends up happening when you're struggling with your identity, I think it happens for all of us post-college and as we grow up. But I think especially for me over the last 14 years plus, it's been this journey of, what is my place here? And how does what I have to contribute fit in to this ecosystem? And how does my identity as a member of this family, even if I go contribute somewhere else, right? My wife has chosen to work in the business. I chose not to work in the business. How does what I do? And I think I lived a lot of shoulds. I lived a lot of, I should do it this way. And I think this is true for many people, but I think it was particularly true for me. And it was like, I should know how to invest my own money really well. I should be successful to this degree. I should be this type of leader, even if those things were not the way I had led successfully in the past, even if those things. And so I think, like, I carried that burden pretty heavy. And I think what I've realized and what I've come to live into in a different way is I need to be myself. I will be more of asset to the family. I'll be more of an asset to my wife. I'll be more of an asset to any organization, group of people I plug into if I come as Reilly, not as who Reilly should be, but who Reilly is. And I work on developing and being the truest, fullest Reilly that I can be in this season.
Well, I like that. Yeah, really
so
good.
Reilly, kind of going with that a little bit, you talked about it earlier with like responsibility and just the fact that it comes with the territory. So I think a lot of times people, specifically with families that have wealth or, that represent foundations or family offices, it's kind of like, well, it's tough. You're going to get asked money of, right? That's kind of the role that you play in our society is, you have wealth and you're to invest that wealth or to give that wealth away. But I'd love to know kind of what that does on the other side, because I have to believe as an investor and a philanthropist, it's hard to really be in close relationship with people oftentimes, because people, they need money for their project, or they have a friend who's working on this new nonprofit or an investment opportunity. And so those things inevitably come up, both in good ways and in bad ways. But then I would imagine, like, you as a person experiencing that, it's like, man, are they really here for me, or are they here for what I represent? And so, kind of, as you've navigated kind of your identity and showing up as Reilly and kind of being more confident in who you are and the leader that you are, what has that been like as you kind of navigated the role of friendships and the role of being and the responsibility of being an investor and a philanthropist?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first thing I would say is people's perceptions are very rarely what actually is true.
So
like
true.
in our scenario, like the wealth number, like if you go Google my father-in-law, the number is a lot higher than what actually is available to the family on a day-to-day basis. And that's because the vast majority of the wealth is still tied up in an operating company. Every family, every wealthy family, the situation's a little different, but in our situation, that's true. And so, the first thing is, like, people are going to come at you with all kinds of perceptions of what your life is or isn't. And sometimes it will be true and sometimes it won't. So you first have to kind of just realize that. I think the second piece, though, is how do you build relationships? I think one of the other things that seems to be true in the world is it's tempting to believe that your situation is no one can appreciate your situation. I don't think that's just about being wealthy. I think that's like everybody kind of has uniqueness, right? We're all unique, and that's what's beautiful about the world, but it's also what can make us feel isolated. And I think in particular in a situation, in the tech environment that we're in today, where everything's being compared, like, we live in this world where where it's possible that we could feel alone. And I think wealth is one of those situations where there can be a lot of self-pity. There's not a lot of people don't say, "Oh, poor you, you have wealth." It's more like, "Hey, come help me out." But then I think the other thing I would say specific to my situation is I think you really have to. I had a mentor who kind of shared, he's in a similar situation I am, but he's, a couple decades on. And he was just kind of like, hey, it's up to you to establish those boundaries, to be vulnerable enough, to invest alongside people enough that you can actually build a relationship, but also, like, you're not putting at risk the relationship by the financial, like, transactional thing that's happening. And I think there's always risk in a transaction. A lot of people say don't work with your friends. And I've been really lucky to invest in and work alongside a number of friends. And I think it's all about communication. It's all about understanding where you are and where you're not. And it's understanding and just really spelling out and codifying, hey, what is this partnership about? What are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? And then what are we not willing to put on the table and risk in this? And yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
that's really good. Well, and then I was also curious, obviously you guys you have kids now, you've been married 14 years. what does that look like as you and your wife talk about kind of the next generation? How do you hope to kind of prepare them? Because I think one of the unique things too is you guys are, the family specifically, obviously with your in-laws, relatively new to this wealth. Obviously, they've built the company over the last several decades, but it's not like it's 4, 5, 6 generations old. And so I know that's a lot of the conversations too around, okay, it's pretty, I'm sure, confusing at times. You're kind of stumbling forward as a family trying to figure it out. But ideally for that next generation, you can help them navigate that better than you did. So what are some of the ways that you guys are thinking through just that intergenerational kind of translation of both that privilege and responsibility, but also kind of their own coming into their own identities, if you will, as they mature?
Yeah. It's a journey. I have 4 kids. They're all still pretty young, ages 8 down to 18 months. And so we're in the early days, but Katie's family has some, we as a family have made efforts to include that third generation, start to include them, start to have conversations. There have been efforts since I've been around to establish, best practices in terms of values and family governance and family involvement and, making clear what expectations are of family members. I think all of those things have been really good and helpful. But I think when you think just about what are your hopes for your kids and what is possible, there's a chance. I mean, this is all a pretty entrepreneurial thing. There's a chance that what's happening could go to zero. Or at least could be significantly diminished from what it is today. That's not what any of us believe is going to happen. That's not what any of us is working toward. But wisdom would say, and having now lived through things like COVID and bank failures and other things, you just have to kind of hold with an open hand anything. And so it's like, what do I want my kids? How do I want them to be equipped come what may? And inevitably, when you dig down and you talk to experts and read books and do other things, it's all about habits. It's all about instilling that resilience, instilling those fundamental kind of character and outlook, philosophy, theology, bringing that to the table for your kids and making sure that they know that they understand the value of a dollar. They understand the value of relationships and the value of community and the value of generosity. And those things are not just about, I think it can be pretty easy to make it about, preservation of wealth and preservation of status and preservation of these things. And it's like, if that's your end game, you're probably always going to be dissatisfied. But if you believe that, hey, we're going to be generous, whether we got $1 in our pocket or we got a bunch of zeros in our bank account, then I think you can start to establish some interesting habits that will transcend generations, that will kind of go beyond whether or not your family's successful in a given business venture or investment.
That's good.
Which ultimately is, how I got into this whole Lome thing, which was how do we build healthy relationships? How do we build healthy habits in the home, right? It's like, technology's got to be able to help us do that. And so we really, that was kind of really how a lot of it came to be. And so my wife and I and our community kind of said, well, if we have the opportunity to take a risk and invest in building something, well, what if we could build a technology company that could build trust and help families establish healthy relationships and healthy habits and help them do that within the home and, in their broader community?
Yeah, I love that principle of, this could all go to zero. And I think that's true for everybody, and I think even in this current market, and it's a reality in our economy, in this world. So how do we hold these things in open hand and really with our children? That's what I love that. We're instilling the values and the principles and a passion for people and community and the world. They understand the value of money. If they understand those things, they've got some good building blocks. And so it doesn't really matter what's in their bank account. They're going to be okay humans. And something good's going to come for that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of More Than Profit. Make sure to check out Reilly's latest project, Lome, for ways to better collaborate as a family or community at withlome.com. To stay up to date with More Than Profit, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, drop us a review so others can find us as well. Don't forget to check out our new website at morethanprofit.fm, where we have additional content and past episodes. You can also learn more about what's ahead by following us on Twitter at listen_MTP. More Than Profit is a production of Access Ventures and is hosted by Bryce Butler and Brian McKay. Our executive producer is Crystal Escobar, and our associate producer is Bryn McKay. Audio production assistance is provided by Resonate Recording. Our theme song today was No Man's Land by Slapstorm. I'm Bryn McKay, and you've been listening to More Than Profit.